funny, isn't it? A man can carry the weight of the world on his back, and still no one stops to ask how his shoulders feel. You can be broken kind, broken hardworking, broken full of potential, but still, the world passes you by like wing through an alley, quiet, cold, indifferent. And maybe that's the first truth no one dares to say out loud. It doesn't matter how you got here. Not to them. You try to explain. You want people to know it wasn't laziness. It wasn't carelessness. You were trying, always trying. But life doesn't hand out prizes for effort. It rewards the ones who crossed the line, not the ones who stumbled. Near it, you tell them about the job you lost, the debts you didn't ask for, the people you helped until you had nothing left, and they nod politely, but their eyes drift elsewhere. It's not cruelty, it's just how life moves. People have their own pain to carry, their own bills, their own regrets. They don't have room for your backstory, even if it's true. That stings, doesn't it? Because part of you believed someone would care, if they just knew the full picture. If they just saw how hard it's been, if they just understood your heart. But here's the hard truth. They don't, and they won't. Not because you're unworthy, not because you don't matter, but because the world doesn't run on empathy. It runs on results, and that's a brutal lesson to learn. Especially when your heart is tender. Especially when you've been giving, and trying, and waiting for someone to see you. You think to yourself, maybe if I explain it better, maybe if I work harder, maybe if I just survive long enough, someone will reach down and pull me out. But what if they don't? What if they're not coming? What if no one ever shows up with the understanding you're waiting for? It's not a failure of humanity. It's not a sign that people are evil. It's just that most are so busy staying afloat, they can't afford to notice who's drowning near them. And I know that sounds cruel, but it's not meant to break you. It's meant to awaken you. Because here's the quiet truth no one tells the man who's struggling. No one cares why you're broke. Not in the way you wish they did, and that's not the end of your story. It's the beginning. Because once you accept that no one's coming to rescue you, you stop waiting. You stop rehearsing your reasons. You stop trying to earn sympathy like it's a currency, and you start building something else entirely. Responsibility, resilience, resolve, not for them, but for you, you see. You don't need the world to understand. You need to understand that your story matters, yes, but only you can turn it into something valuable. Only you can take your broken pieces and build a bridge out of them. The world won't ask for your reasons. It will ask for your results. It will ask, can you show up? Can you deliver? Can you solve a problem, move a needle, create something they didn't know they needed? If you can, they won't care where you came from. They'll just want more of what you bring. But until that day, the silence will remain, and you'll have to learn to walk through it, without applause, without comfort, without a crowd, just you, and the truth you carry like a lantern in the dark. No one cares why you're broke, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy. It means you have to care enough to do something about it, not to prove it to them, but to prove it to yourself. Now let me ask you something. Have you been trying to be understood when what you really need is to rise? Because maybe that's why you're still stuck, maybe. It's not the poverty that's holding you. Maybe it's the waiting for the world to care. But what if you stopped waiting? What if this was the day you let go of being seen and started becoming someone they couldn't ignore? You don't need their sympathy, you need your strength. And it's still there, quiet, buried, waiting for you beneath all that explaining, all that hoping, all that pain. You can still find it, even now. But only if you stop expecting the world to care why you're broke. It doesn't. And maybe that's the very thing that can finally set you free. You've been carrying this story for a long time now, haven't you? The story of why things didn't go the way they should have. The story of who hurt you, what they took, what they never gave back. You replay it in your mind like an old song. Not because it brings joy, but because it brings order. It helps you make sense of the mess. This is why I'm here, you whisper to yourself. This is why I don't have what others have, and maybe you're right. Maybe life did knock you down harder than most. Maybe you were born into debt, not just financial, but emotional, generational, invisible kinds of debt. The kind that doesn't show up on a statement, but shows up in your self-worth, in your confidence, in your ability to dream bigger than your circumstances. And I want you to know, I see that. I don't brush it aside. I don't pretend it's nothing. But I'll tell you something that may not feel good to hear. If you keep waiting for the world to acknowledge your pain before you move forward, you'll be waiting your whole life, because the world doesn't hand out medals for survival. It rewards those who build something, even after they've been torn apart. You may think you need justice before you can move, but you don't. You need clarity. You need to realize that waiting to be seen is its own kind of poverty. It drains your time, your power, your focus. It keeps you stuck in conversations that go nowhere, trying to prove your struggle is valid, trying to get someone, anyone, to say, yes, what happened to you wasn't fair. And the truth is, it wasn't fair. It never was. But the question is no longer about fairness. The question now is, what will you do with what remains? Because there's a part of you that's still alive under the rubble, still breathing, still able to choose. And that part of you doesn't need the world to validate your story. That part of you only needs you. You are the only one who can decide when your story stops being a reason and starts becoming a resource. Do you see the difference? Most people cling to their past like it's a shield. They say, I can't move forward until someone makes this right. But no one's coming to make it right. Not your old boss, not your family, not the government, not the people who forgot about you when you needed them most. And if you keep waiting for them, you're handing over your future for the sake of a past that's already been lived. You're trading your potential for a receipt, proof of pain, instead of the pursuit of power. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you woke up and decided not to be your past that day? When was the last time you spoke about your future louder than your wounds? Because here's the thing. You can't drive your life forward looking in the rearview mirror. Not for long. You'll crash, and most people do, not because they're stupid, but because they're hurt. And pain has a funny way of blinding us. It convinces us the world owes us something, and maybe it does, but it's not going to pay. So you have to ask yourself, how much more time will I lose explaining what happened to me, instead of building what could happen next? Because the clock is still ticking, and your future doesn't wait for your past to finish its story. It just keeps moving, with or without you. You don't have to forget what was done to you, but you do have to stop bowing to it. You don't have to pretend the pain wasn't real, but you do have to stop letting it be the compass that directs your next step. Your story matters, yes, but only if you use it. Only if you take it out of your mouth and put it into your hands, shape something with it, build something with it, sell something with it, serve someone with it. Otherwise, it's just weight, and you're not here to carry weight. You're here to carry purpose, but purpose doesn't come to the waiting. It comes to the willing. So the question isn't, why don't they care that I'm broke? The real question is, why am I still waiting for them to care? Because the day you stop waiting is the day you start creating, and the world, it may not clap, it may not notice, but it will respond to results, to movement, to value, And when it does, you'll realize you never needed their sympathy. You just needed to get moving before it was too late, and it's not too late yet. You're still breathing, you're still listening, you're still here. So, are you done waiting? Or are you ready to build? It's a strange thing, how people cling to sympathy like it's a lifeboat, as if being understood is the same as being saved. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Sympathy is warm, yes, it can soothe your soul for a moment. But it won't change your circumstances. It won't pay your rent. It won't feed your children. It won't build you anything lasting, and that's the trap, isn't it? When you've suffered for so long, even a little kindness feels like a miracle, so you stay close to it. You keep telling your story in hopes of hearing those soft words again. I'm so sorry that happened to you. You crave that moment, not because you're weak, but because you're tired. You just want someone to understand, to hold space for the weight you've carried, to say, you didn't deserve this. And maybe you didn't, but here's what no one tells you, even if they understand, even if they mean every word, you're still broke, you're still stuck. You're still the one who has to climb out of the hole. Sympathy is not a ladder, it's a blanket. And you cannot climb with a blanket wrapped around your shoulders. There comes a point where you have to decide, do I want to be comforted, or do I want to be free? Because you can't have both, not forever. One keeps you warm where you are. The other demands that you move, and moving. That's where the real fear is, isn't it? Because once you stop blaming the world, once you stop waiting for them to understand, you run out of excuses, you're left with silence. And in that silence, you hear the only voice that matters. Your own, not the voice of pain, not the voice of shame, but the voice of choice. You can begin again. Right here, not because it's fair, but because it's time. You see, poverty. It's not just a matter of money, it's a mindset, a momentum, a rhythm that keeps you circling the same block of disappointment. And as long as you believe the world owes you something, you stay in that loop, trying to trade your pain for pity. But pity doesn't pay in this world. Results do, solutions do, value does. The people who rise, they rise not because they're the smartest, not because they're the most talented, but because they stopped looking outward and started digging inward. They realized no one's coming to rescue them, and they chose to rescue themselves, slowly, painfully, one step at a time. They traded the soft comfort of sympathy for the harsh power of self-responsibility, and over time, that trade gave them everything. You want to know why most people stay poor? It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're dumb. It's because they're waiting for someone to validate their struggle, instead of converting that struggle into strength. And I don't blame them. I used to be one of them. Remember sitting alone in a room, rent overdue, fridge half empty, heart full of reasons why life had been unfair. And it was. Life was unfair. But that didn't stop the rent from coming. That didn't stop the world from moving on without me. And at some point, something broke in me, or maybe something woke up. I stopped waiting for them to understand, and I started asking myself, what can I control? What can I build? What can I sell, even if it's just my time, my strength, my ability to solve a problem? I had nothing, but nothing is where most great things begin. From there, I moved, not fast, not with confidence, but I moved, and each step forward, I traded a little more sympathy for a little more power. And I'll tell you this, power is colder than sympathy. But it gets you further, it builds things, it changes your life. So my friend, if you're still chasing someone to understand you, if you're still hoping the world will care, I need to ask you something. How long are you going to carry this story before you let it evolve? How many more years will you explain your pain instead of transforming it? Because the truth is, you don't have to stay here, but you can't leave and keep the blanket of sympathy with you. You have to trade it for vision, for action, for truth, and the truth is, you are not powerless, not anymore, not unless you choose to be. So what'll it be? Warmth that holds you still, or fire that moves you forward? Because no one cares why you're broke, but one day, they might care how you broke free, and that story is still yours to write. You know what the world really responds to? Value, not emotion, not struggle, not even effort, just value. You could be the hardest working person in the room, but if what you offer doesn't solve a problem, doesn't fill a need, doesn't shift something forward, then the world will pass you by without a second glance. And that's hard to accept, especially when you've given everything, especially when your back is sore, your heart is heavy, and your soul is tired of trying. But value doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't ask how long you've been fighting. It only asks, what can you do that matters? That's the economy of the world. Always has been, always will be. You see, money flows toward usefulness. It flows toward clarity. It flows toward people who stop asking for help and start offering it. Now that might sound cruel, especially when you're still struggling to help yourself, but it's not meant to crush you. It's meant to refocus you, because the moment you shift from I need to I can give, something powerful begins to move, not instantly, not all at once, but steadily. And that's the shift most people never make. They keep thinking if they just work harder, it'll change. But hard work without direction is just exhaustion. It's like running on a treadmill. You sweat, you ache, but you stay in the same place. Value isn't just about effort. It's about effectiveness. It's about knowing what the world needs and positioning yourself to meet it. Even if it's small at first, even if it's humble, even if it doesn't look like the dream you had. In your 20s, it's okay to start where you are, but it's not okay to stay where you're not valued, not if you want to rise. I've seen brilliant people stay broke, not because they weren't gifted, but because they were too proud to adapt, too wounded to try again, too busy waiting to be discovered instead of learning how to offer something useful. And I've seen others, quieter, simpler folks, start small, listen more, serve better, and slowly become indispensable, not because they were special, but because they understood the game. The world doesn't care why you're broke, it cares what you can contribute. Can you teach something? Can you solve something? Can you fix, guide, build, explain, uplift, lead, support? That's what moves the needle, not your background, not your tears, not your dreams alone. Dreams without direction are just illusions. They feel good, but they fade fast. So if you want to stop being poor, you have to start asking different questions. Not, why won't anyone help me? But, what do I have that others need? What can I become that the world will value? Because that's the shift that sets people free. And maybe you're thinking, but I don't have anything. Not yet. I hear that. I've lived that, but you'd be surprised what's inside you. Buried under all the frustration and noise, you have experiences, stories, lessons learned the hard way. You have instincts. You have the ability to listen, to observe, to notice what others miss. Those things may not seem valuable to you, because you've never been taught to see them that way. But everything the world pays for, every job, every business, every skill, it all boils down to one thing: solving problems, even the most basic, humble skill. If it makes someone's life easier, if it saves them time, if it reduces their pain, it becomes valuable. So ask yourself, What problems have I solved in my own life? What pain have I learned to live with that others still don't know how to handle? That's where it begins. That's where your value starts to wake up, not in some distant, perfect version of yourself, but in the quiet truth of who you are right now, what you know, what you can offer, even if it's just a little at first, because value isn't about being the best. It's about being useful, consistently, reliably, and the moment you step into that role, even in the smallest way, the world begins to shift. Slowly, yes, but steadily, you go from invisible to necessary. From ignored to respected, from broke to valuable, and all of it starts not with being understood, but with choosing to become useful. So if you want to stop being poor, don't ask for more help. Don't wait for more pity. Ask instead, where can I be of service? Where can I become so useful they can't ignore me anymore? There's something else you should know, something most people never talk about. But it's real. I've seen it, lived it, felt it pressing against my chest at night like a weight I couldn't name. It's the invisible wall that surrounds poverty, not made of brick or steel, but made of shame, doubt, and silence. You try to climb out, but something pulls you back. Not your hands, not your feet, but your mind. It whispers, who do you think you are? You don't belong on the other side. You're not like them. And maybe you've felt it too. That quiet fear, that rising panic when you try to do something different, start a business, apply for a better job, charge more for your time, speak up in a room where people have money in their voice, and suddenly you shrink, you pull back, not because you're lazy, but because something deep inside still believes, I'm not enough, I'm not allowed, I'm not worthy. That's the real trap. Not just the lack of money, but the belief that you are meant to lack. That belief keeps people poor longer than any economy ever could, because once you accept being broke as your identity, you stop trying to rise, you stop imagining yourself free, you stop asking, and when you stop asking, you stop receiving, you settle into survival, and survival becomes familiar, and familiar becomes safe, even if it's slowly killing your dreams. You stop taking risks, stop saying yes to growth, stop saying no to the things that drain you, and that's the invisible wall, not built by others, but built by years of hearing, you can't, years of watching others win while you barely make it, years of trying and failing, and telling yourself maybe this is just the way it is. But let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. Just because you've lived in lack doesn't mean you belong there. Just because you've been poor doesn't mean poverty is your identity. You are not the balance in your bank account. You are not the bills on your table. You are not the mistakes you've made. You are not the job you lost, or the one you had to take just to get by. You are not your lowest moment. But as long as you keep rehearsing it, as long as you keep seeing yourself through the eyes of someone who failed, you will recreate that failure again and again, because the mind is a builder, and it builds what you believe. So if you believe you're always meant to struggle, you will sabotage anything that looks like success, not because you don't want it, but because it feels foreign, unsafe, too different from what you know. I've seen men walk away from opportunity because they didn't feel worthy of the room. I've seen women shrink their prices, their voices, their power, because somewhere in their mind, they believed they were asking for too much. But hear me, you are not asking for too much. You are asking from too little. You are trying to rise, while dragging the old you behind like a shadow. But the old you can't come where you're going. The one who waited, the one who begged, the one who explained his pain like a resume, he served his purpose, he kept you alive. But now, It's time to be someone new, and that requires courage, not the loud kind. Not the kind that stands on stages and shouts, but the quiet kind, the kind that sits with the shame and says, I see you, but I won't let you lead anymore. The kind that walks into rooms that feel too big, with a back still sore from years of survival, and says, I'm here to build something different now. Because once you break through that invisible wall, everything begins to shift. The world still won't care why you were broke, but it will start to pay attention to who you've become. And that matters more, because you're not here to be pitied. You're here to be powerful. But that power, it only shows up when you stop living like you're still stuck. You are not stuck, not unless you keep telling yourself you are. So let me ask you, what do you believe about people like you? People from your neighborhood, people from your story, people with your wounds. Because your belief, that's the ceiling, and it won't break until you decide you no longer belong underneath it. You can carry your story like a suitcase, dragging it into every room you enter, telling yourself the weight is why you're tired, why you haven't gotten anywhere, why people should understand, should wait for you, should lower the bar. But the world, it doesn't work that way, does it? You learn slowly that pain doesn't pay the rent, and a hard past doesn't cover today's bill, and sympathy doesn't fill the refrigerator, and it hurts because it feels like your struggle should matter more than it does, that people should care, that life should notice how much you've endured. But here's the cold wind of truth that few want to face. Life moves forward. Whether you're limping or lying flat, it keeps moving. And it will leave you behind if all you do is hold out your pain like a passport. The world doesn't accept that kind of ID. Not for long. Now, I'm not telling you to ignore the wounds. They're real. I've seen them. I've worn some myself. Days when all you can do is stare at the wall, when the noise in your head drowns out the rest of the world. But staying there, in that room where you're always the victim, always the one who is wronged, always the one with the long explanation. That room becomes a prison, and the door doesn't lock from the outside. You keep waiting for someone to come open it. But no one's coming. You keep hoping someone will hear your story and say, you've been through enough, let me carry you now. But no one says it. Not for long. Not in a way that truly changes your life. Because here's another hard truth. People are drowning in their own waters. They don't have time to swim down and save you. They're just trying to stay afloat. So you have two choices. You can keep replaying the reel of what happened to you. The unfairness, the betrayals, the childhood that broke more than it built, the boss who overlooked you, the partner who left, the chances you never got. Or you can get up, not because you're ready, not because you're healed, but because it's the only way forward. Because no one's going to build a bridge to your pain. You'll have to build it yourself, plank by plank, with whatever scraps you've got left. And yes, that's unfair. Yes, it's exhausting. But it's the only way out. You think success is about knowing more, doing more, earning more. But sometimes, it starts with letting go of the idea that your pain buys you time or pity, or passes. It doesn't. Not in this world. What it can buy, if you use it right, is hunger. Drive. A fire no one sees, but you feel it. That never again voice that whispers when you're tempted to stop. You can let your pain paralyze you. Or you can let it become the fuel, but you have to choose. No one's choosing for you. No one's coming to lift you up because of what you've been through. They may care briefly, they may listen. But then they move on. And if you're still there, Still clutching your story like it's all you've got, you'll be the one left in the cold, not because people are cruel, but because life keeps going. And the world only rewards what you do, not what you've been through. That's not heartless. That's just how it is. So ask yourself, do you want to be understood? Or do you want to be free? Because those aren't always the same thing. And maybe, just maybe, your breakthrough doesn't start with someone caring. It starts when you stop waiting for them to. You ever notice something strange about success? When you've got it, people listen, people nod, people admire. Even if your words are hollow, they echo louder than 1,000 truths whispered by the poor. But when you're struggling, when the bills are overdue, when your shirt is faded and your shoes worn through, suddenly, your voice doesn't carry anymore. It's like the world's ears go deaf to your struggle. It isn't fair, but it is real. That's the bitter law no one teaches you growing up. Value speaks louder than excuses. Results drown out reasons. And in this world, perception often gets paid more than pain. Now listen. I'm not saying your story doesn't matter. Your story is sacred. Your scars are real. Your journey has weight. But the truth is, most people don't have the space to carry your burdens for you. They're drowning in their own. And so if you don't produce, if you don't show up with something useful, you get pushed to the edge of the marketplace, invisible, disposable. It's brutal, but it's not new. Even back in the old villages, the man who couldn't plow, couldn't hunt, couldn't trade, he didn't get a bigger bowl of rice because he meant well. He got left behind, not because they were cruel, but because they were surviving. And survival does not make room for sentiment. That's the world, son. That's the world, daughter. Not how it should be, but how it is. And until you see it clearly, you'll keep playing a game you don't understand. Thinking effort alone earns reward. Thinking sympathy fills pockets. Thinking someone will come and fix it all for you once they hear your side of the story. But no one's coming. Not the government. Not your cousin with the better car. Not the boss who said you had potential. Not even the friend who said, if you ever need anything. They mean well, sure, but when the rent's due and your fridge is empty, their good intentions won't pay the bill collector banging at your door. And here's the deepest cut. The longer you hold on to the need to be understood before you act, the longer you'll stay stuck. Because the market doesn't care about your trauma. The bank doesn't care about your childhood. And opportunity doesn't wait until your self-esteem heals. You have to move even when you're broken. You have to build even when you feel small. You have to offer something first. Not wait until someone validates your pain. Is it fair? No, but it is freeing once you accept it. Because once you let go of needing the world to care, you stop begging, you stop explaining, you stop waiting for permission, and you start doing the one thing the world does respect. You produce, you add value, you solve problems, you become useful, not perfect, not polished, just useful. That's how you rise. That's how you go from being ignored to being paid attention to, from being pitied to being respected. From being broke to being trusted. But none of that starts while you're still asking, why won't they care? The answer is simple. They won't, at least not until you give them something they can use. Something that serves, something that works. And then, maybe, they'll ask about your past. Maybe then they'll care. But by that time, you won't need them to. Because you'll already be standing on your own feet. And that, my friend, is when you'll finally understand the harshest truth was also the most liberating one all along. Let me ask you something, quietly, like an old friend might. What would your life look like if you finally stopped waiting to be rescued? Not in a dramatic movie-like sense. I don't mean someone riding in on a white horse with a briefcase of money or an easy solution. I mean this. What if you stopped waiting for someone to get it? Stopped waiting for your boss to see your potential, for your parents to finally say, "You did good," for the economy to improve, for the market to open up, for someone, anyone to say, "I see how hard it's been, and I'm here to help." Because here's the harsh truth you've been circling around. That moment might never come, and I know how painful that is. I know because I've sat in that same silent room you have, where the only sound is the weight of your own thoughts, where every effort you've made feels like it vanished into the wind and no one noticed. You've tried. You've stumbled. You've gotten back up, but still. No hand, no applause, no lifeline. That's when it clicks for those who eventually rise. The world doesn't reward effort. It rewards results. You don't get paid for trying to build a house. You get paid when the house stands. You don't get rewarded for dreaming. You get rewarded when the dream becomes useful to someone else. That's the turning point. When you stop needing recognition in order to continue, and instead you decide to be useful, with or without applause, with or without understanding. It's not cold. It's not cruel. It's just the way the current flows, and you've got two choices, always. You can fight the current, complain about the coldness of the water, scream about how no one's throwing you a rope. Or you can learn to swim anyway, because once you do, something beautiful happens. People start to notice, not out of sympathy, but out of respect. They start to listen. They start to follow. They start to ask how you did it. The same people who once walked past you without a glance now lean in and say, "Tell me more." But by then, you'll know, it wasn't their approval that made you strong. It was your decision to keep going without it. That's the secret most never learn. The world is watching. Even when it looks away. It's watching to see if you'll fold, watching to see if you'll stop, watching to see if you mean it. And when you persist, quietly, consistently, fiercely, the world begins to shift. Not because it feels sorry for you, but because it finally sees that you're useful, that you create value, that you solve problems, that you don't crumble under silence. And in this world, usefulness is magnetic. You'll attract opportunity, not pity. Partners, not patrons. Wealth, not crumbs of kindness. But first, you've got to bury the need to be understood. You've got to let go of the fantasy that someone's going to come knock on your door and say, "I heard about your struggles. Let me take care of it." It doesn't happen like that. No, it happens when you start knocking on your own door. When you say, "Enough waiting." When you get up, no matter how messy, how unsure, how heavy it all feels, and move forward anyway. That's when you reclaim your power. That's when the world, slowly, reluctantly, then suddenly starts to take notice. And by then, you'll realize something strange. You no longer need them to care, because you've become the kind of person who knows how to build, how to move, how to earn, how to raise, with or without permission. And that, my friend, is a kind of freedom no one can ever take from you. Let me tell you something hard, but necessary. If you want to change your life, not talk about it, not dream about it, not complain about how hard it's been, but actually change it, you must shift your identity from someone who explains to someone who delivers, from a person who has reasons to a person who produces results. You can either have reasons or you can have results. The world rarely gives you credit for both. It's not fair. It's not gentle. It's not soft, but it is reality. When you apply for a job, They don't ask why you failed the last one. They ask what you've done, what you can bring, what proof you have that you can solve their problems. When you start a business, market doesn't care if you had a rough childhood. It only cares whether you offer something of value. When you try to borrow money or attract investors, they don't care how good your intentions are. They care if your numbers work, because results speak louder than explanations ever could. And here's the hardest truth. The more you defend your reasons, the less energy you have to produce results that you get emotionally attached to your struggle. You begin to believe that being broke and misunderstood makes you special. But the market doesn't pay you for being special. It pays you for being useful. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying your story doesn't matter. Your pain does matter. Your journey, your trauma, your experiences, they shaped you. They're not meaningless. But when it comes to the game of money, the world doesn't reward who tried the hardest. It rewards who solved the problem. That we live in a results-based economy, not an effort-based one. That's why two people can start from the same place, same town, same struggles, and one breaks free while the other stays stuck. One decided that no one was coming to save them and acted accordingly. The other waited for someone to understand. Think of a person who fell into a deep hole. They shout, "It's not my fault I'm down here." And maybe they're right. Maybe someone pushed them. Maybe the ground gave way. Maybe life was truly unfair. But if they spend the next 5 years yelling at the sky about why they fell, instead of climbing, do you know what happens? They stay in the hole. Eventually, the world forgets they're even down there. It's not cruelty. It's focus, because while they were shouting, others were climbing. I say this not to shame you, but to awaken you. To shake you free from the idea that sympathy will pay your bills. It won't. Only your value does that. Only your results. So ask yourself, what am I building right now? Not what you've been through, not how bad it was, but what you're building today. Because that's the only currency that counts. We don't get paid for our pain, we get paid for what we do with it. May have every reason in the world to be bitter, to be angry, to feel stuck. And I wouldn't blame you for feeling any of that. But if you want a different life, you must stop selling your reasons to people who aren't buying and start delivering results no one can ignore. No one cares why you're broke, but they'll care what you become. And that, my friend, is your power. Let me leave you with this. When you walk into a room, results speak before you open your mouth. They enter first. They draw the eye. They shift the air. They are undeniable. You don't have to beg people to listen to you when you carry results. Don't have to explain yourself 100 different ways. You don't need to prove your worth with long stories about what could have been. If only life had gone your way, because results carry their own story. And that story is simple. This person solves problems. This person shows up. This person produces. You don't have to be the loudest in the room. You don't have to dress to impress or shout your credentials. Results quietly command respect. They're like gravity, unseen but deeply felt. You want to be wealthy, respected, trusted? Produce. Let your actions make the introductions. Let your work build your name. Let your value do the talking. Now, here's the turning point. The moment your life begins to shift. When you stop trying to get people to understand your struggle and start making yourself impossible to ignore. Not through complaining, not through comparison, but through consistent, quiet results. Build a life that doesn't need defending. Build a reputation that walks ahead of you, Because here's the truth. Most people never understand. You are not rewarded for your potential. You are rewarded for your output. Potential is lovely. It makes people pat you on the back and say, "You've got talent." But it doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't close deals. It doesn't build wealth. Only execution does that. And execution comes from a simple shift in mindset. From, "Why is this happening to me?" to "What am I going to do about it?" So, if you're tired of being broke, tired of being stuck in the same patterns, tired of telling the same story about why you haven't made it yet, then this is your moment. This is the part where you stop explaining and start executing, because no one cares why you're broke, but they will care when you're not. When you rise, when you produce, when you become the person who stopped giving reasons and started delivering results. And when that day comes, and it will, if you stay the course, you won't need to tell the world what you've overcome. They'll see it. In your posture. In your peace. In your progress. And in your results.